Welcome to the first Lunchtime Looks of 2025. It is a pleasure to have you all here to talk about a particular work of art, but also to meet one of our newest staff members here at the Art Museum of WVU. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you Virginia Affemann, who is the DeLynn Coordinator for Education and Program Coordinator for Education and Outreach. Their position is a new full-time position that is supporting educational programs here at the Art Museum and is generously funded by the DeLynn Foundation. And we're really excited about how that can build and grow our capacity to reach more members of our community. So Virginia is a 2024 graduate of West Virginia University with a degree in anthropology. And I first met them when they began working in the museum as one of our student workers and student attendants. And we've managed to create a career pipeline as well, which is another really exciting aspect of this addition. So without further ado, I am going to introduce you to Virginia. They're going to tell you about a specific work of art and then also a little bit about the work that they and we do here at the Art Museum. All right, thank you, Virginia.
Thank you. Hi there. So I'm Virginia, as Heather told you. I am the DeLynn Program Coordinator for Education and Outreach. And first, I would just like to thank the DeLynn Foundation. It is really amazing, like Heather said, to sort of increase our capacity in this way. And we've been able to expand our programming. We're booking more tours this year because I can lead them. It's not just Heather, because she does need to sleep and eat and live a life outside of this job. And so I can take on things that she can't, so it's not all on her. And we've also launched a traveling workshop program. So instead of always having schools come here and groups having to be here to do art activities with us, we're gonna go out to some schools, especially we're excited to work with some more like rural schools that usually can't make it out here for a field trip because they can't get buses or they're too far or whatever the reason. But we're really excited to sort of be able to serve parts of the community that we haven't before, that haven't been reached by us as consistently. And that's thanks to the DeLynn Foundation, so we'd like to thank them. Now, onto the artwork. So we're going to be talking about this expansive piece. And this is a work by Hassan Elahi, and it's called Thousand Little Brothers. This is, I believe, the date on this is 2024, but it has been displayed in other museums in other years. And it takes on a slightly different form every time, depending on how it ends up being displayed in the space. So it started as part of a project by Elahi called Tracking Transients. And this started in 2002 after Elahi was detained by the FBI getting off a plane in Detroit from the Netherlands. So they later told him that they had gotten a false tip, that he had a hoard of explosives in a Florida storage unit. He took a lie detector test, they interviewed him, they determined he was not their guy, he was innocent. But it really shook him up, as it would. And so the FBI agents gave him their cell phone numbers or contact information, and he travels a lot for work. He's an artist, so he travels to display works and speak at conferences, things like that. So he decided that he would call them before every flight he took. So he started calling them, letting them know where he would be going, and he hadn't been detained since. According to Elahi, it turned out to be a pretty effective plan. And in addition to this contact with the FBI agents, he also began taking photos and uploading them to his website. I believe it's called trackingtransients.net. There is a QR code on this first page of the packet. I think the website technically is elahi.wayne.net because he's at Wayne University, but that QR code should take you there. And as of 2016, I believe, there was 85,000 photos uploaded. So he has done this, I think he's still taking and uploading pictures, or it lasted over 15 years. And it's a lot of like meals. So that's what this piece is made up of. It's all sorts of tiny little images compiled into this artwork. Meals, unmade beds, and to quote Elahi, every toilet I've ever used. That made it in there. If you are on the Tracking Transients website, sometimes there will be whole displays just of toilets. So that take that however you want to. He said, after all, the FBI wanted to know everything about me, and I'm all about full disclosure. So he really meant it. And this website has actually been visited by the Secretary of Defense, the Executive Office of the President, and the Pentagon, amongst others. His server logs show all these government offices. They have checked up on him, I suppose. And so that's part of where the title comes from, 1,000 Little Brothers. It's a reference to George Orwell's 1984 and this idea of Big Brother always watching. It's sort of a play on that. And it also has these colored stripes overlaid atop the pictures. And that is meant to evoke the national broadcast system for the US. When we have emergency broadcasts, when they do that test screen on your TV, it has these stripes. But there's also a sort of art historical reference. If you turn to the sort of second couple pages of this packet in here, Elahi also referenced the Washington Color School, which was an art movement or collective of artists primarily working in the 1950s and 60s. They emerged sort of in response to New York abstract expressionists, and instead of the sort of Jackson Pollock splatter painting type style, they did a lot of geometric, hard edge shapes and lines with bright colors, and there's not a lot of blending, not a lot of softness, it's very structured. So the primary artists were Morris Lewis, Kenneth Noland, Thomas Downing, Paul Reed, and Gene Davis. Gene Davis in particular, in I believe the third page of this packet, is most famous perhaps for his stripes. And they're pretty simple, you can see, but that was another influence for this pattern here that Elahi mentioned specifically. And I think that the colors are the most obvious. They're pretty similar. But also Gene Davis, I think it's the last page of your packet. I just put that picture in there to show you sort of scale. A lot of Gene Davis's pieces are much bigger than a human. He said, I like to make my stripes taller than a man. And so I don't know if it's an intentional connection or just sort of a coincidence, but I thought that it was interesting that Gene Davis has these really expansive, large-scale paintings. And Elahi also has really a grand sort of scale. I believe another installation of 1,000 Little Brothers was 32,000 photos. I'm not sure exactly how many are in here because we cut off the excess at the top and bottom of the wall. But there's probably tens of thousands. And yeah, I think that the scale is a big part of this artwork. It communicates a lot. It's sort of all-encompassing, especially when you're like right in front of it. It's sort of consuming. And so I think that the connection there between Davis's work is also, it was really interesting to me. But the primary purpose of this artwork is sort of a commentary on 21st century surveillance, and especially this sort of self-surveillance. Elahi talked in interviews about how people sort of can't fathom that he does this. Like, how could you document every second of your life? It's weird, it's sort of invasive. But he said he's actually a really private person, and by sort of displaying these really mundane aspects of his life, like these are available to everyone, but not much is necessarily known about him and his personal life. And he also, he teaches, and he talked about how like it makes perfect sense to his students and people closer to my age of like, most of us have been sort of broadcasting our lives on social media for forever, for as long as we can remember, for good or bad, whether that's a positive or negative. But yeah, he was sort of, it's a statement on surveillance, and especially in the aftermath of 9/11 and this sort of heightened sense of security and protection of our national security. And it sort of allowed him to take back the power. I mean, it was a very destabilizing event. That's scary, and especially in 2002, people were sent to Guantanamo Bay without a lot of evidence sometimes. So it was a really scary thing that happened to him. And I think that this is also partially an opportunity to sort of reclaim a sense of autonomy. He sort of decides what the FBI knows about him and when we can all see this information, but he's in control of it, even though it's so accessible to all of us. And that's about it for my discussion of the piece, sort of art historical references. And next I'm going to talk about how we integrate pieces into our educational outreach here. We try to get as many people in here as humanly possible, school tours, groups, any ages. We have preschoolers come, we have lifelong learners come, doesn't matter. And so a lot of our job is sort of adapting our materials to be understandable and appropriate for the 4-year-olds and also the lifelong learners, because we probably wouldn't give quite as much historical context to the preschoolers naturally. But we try to get creative. If you all came last semester for Our Votes, Our Values, there was some pieces up towards the front. One was Jacob Lawrence, Confrontation at the Bridge, and it was a depiction of the Edmund Pettus Bridge March in 1965 Selma for voting rights for African Americans. And it features a police dog, and it references the sort of police brutality that was a part of those marches, or the attempted marches. And so that is pretty heavy stuff to talk about. And we want to teach as many people, even kids, about it. But we don't always need to go into, scary details. Sometimes it's a little bit too much for the younger kids, early elementary. But we did a lot of activities about like body language, and we sort of had these kids hold tension in their bodies in the way that the people in the print were depicted, and sort of tried to get them to understand and empathize some of what was going on without showing them images of, police rallies and all of the worst parts of those events. And so again, a similar thing here, we probably aren't going to get into the nuance of xenophobia and racial profiling in the aftermath of 9/11, because that's a little bit too much if you're 6 years old. But we still can talk about surveillance, we can talk about photos, how we interact with photos in the modern day. I feel like with kids we'll probably make a lot of sort of social media connections here, like Elahi talked about his students understanding this concept a lot. I feel like kids who are young right now are probably even more sort of clued into social media and surrounded by those sort of influences. But yeah, so we sort of adapt to whatever age group we're talking about. And we also really like to do art making activities, naturally. So I have some sort of props here that I can pass around. So first of all, yes, great, perfect. So if you know our mural out there, the Nina Chanel Abney, it has big I am signs, and those are in reference to the Memphis sanitation workers strike and the I am a man protest signs. But we sort of have these little worksheets that we give kids, but also anyone, adults. It's pretty fun for everyone. I'm passionate, I'm silly. So those are pretty fun. And we did cardboard loom weavings. You guys are welcome to pass these around, but these were in connection with the knitting map last semester and Jules Gilson's piece. And we used these cardboard looms to make them. We've also did some textile mapping, as in the knitting map, and sort of explored different things that a map can look like. So these were actually done by myself and another program assistant when I was working as one. But the kids got really into it. I believe this is an example that like a student left behind. But we just sort of, we want them to get hands-on experiences. We want them to be thinking about mediums and art making and how things get made. And something that I'm most excited about, I am somewhat trained in bookbinding, and because we have Radiant Pages going on, we're going to be doing some bookbinding workshops. So we have some little like pamphlet bindings that we're gonna do with like younger kids. They're pretty simple. And then we also have, if you would like to, welcome to pass them around. We also have, these are called Coptic journals. So you can see the sewings on the spines, and we think we're gonna do these with some older kids and also probably hold like a public program. If anyone wants to come learn how to bookbind, that will be happening, I believe, in March. So yeah, these I think we're gonna do with older kids and adults. And And especially it seems important to sort of teach young people about where books come from and that not everything was always mechanized and machine made. So this is a really good opportunity to sort of show them books as bound objects, sewn objects. These are handmade things, or they were for hundreds of years. And yeah, so it's a really good opportunity for us to explore different art making techniques with all different people. Yeah, so you all are welcome to sort of leaf through those. I think that's about all that I have to say.
You didn't answer my question.
Yeah.
Okay, Carol had a question beforehand, and so now Carol's gonna.
Yes, please.
Is that all one piece, or is it multiple pieces put together? Because from here, it looks like multiple pieces, but I can't tell.
So it is one piece, but all of these little squares are different photographs. So these are all different photographs, but I believe the material, I believe Bob can answer. It's just rolls of like vinyl printed.
Yes, and this takes on, as you mentioned, this takes on, as was mentioned, the piece takes on different dimensions every time it's used, and it fits the space. So when I had a conversation with the artist, I explained how I would like it displayed, and then it was printed on a material called phototext to fit within the space. And it has been displayed very large in different situations, in different configurations, shapes in the past. But what the artist did was put all of the photographs together based on scale. His intention is for it to be overwhelming, and the scale is what is important each time it's presented.
And is that painter's tape over there?
No, that's paint.
That is paint.
It's paint that is shockingly similar in color to most painters.
That's fair enough.
to most painters' tape. But it is this whole wall, if you're on the other side of it. All right, so I was going to invite Q&A, but Carol jumped right in. Does anyone else have questions for Virginia, either about this work of art or about their work here at the museum?
This is a silly question. Do you think it would be more effective if it had that loud beep at the
I think that's a great point, and yes, I do. Honestly, I think a sonic component would be good. It is. I mean, the emergency broadcast system gets your attention, and so maybe it would be. And yeah, he was sort of he made that reference to sort of imply that the state of 21st century surveillance constitutes a national emergency. So maybe it would be good to have the
I don't know if our student workers who attend our galleries every weekend would think that it was good to have that constant din behind them, but it certainly might add another layer to the piece. Any other questions for Virginia? George?
I don't think it's a question as much as maybe it was a comment, how much I appreciate what you were saying when the young people come in and observe and learn about this and then go and actually do a hands-on project, because my assumption is they're carrying away what they
Yes, exactly.
create.
Yeah, they leave with their creations.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
exactly.
consequently, that stays with them for whatever amount of time. But it's a very appropriate.
Yeah, no, that's probably one of the best parts of the job, is to watching kids make these things and get excited about art, and then they get to go home and show their classmates or their parents, and yeah, it's great.
I invest in a lot of large disposable lasagna trays, because what we do when we have, say, and again, people ask these logistics, when we bring 100 students through here, let's say North Elementary School, second grade is all coming, 90 some of them in a couple weeks. So we take the 4 classes that constitute that second grade and we do stations. So one in this gallery, one upstairs gallery, one in the Museum Education Center making things, and one with our mural and lobby art. And we rotate them all 4 through that. And then I have a big lasagna tray for each class. So Mrs. Harris's class has a lasagna tray. And we put in, so if they did those little canvases, those little square canvases in their MEC art making activity, they all do that. But then we also have, if they have their posters that they did looking at the mural. And it's just one of these funny little things. You start to look, I sometimes wonder what my expense reports look like to the university because I'm like, I need 200 lasagna trays. But it's this wonderful way we send it all home with them. They have artifacts from multiple places in the museum, and it's a way to do that safely, that we can get it back with teachers, that bus drivers still will bring kids here because we don't want to send them all with wet paints and beads and things. So they're funny little things that you learn over the years about how to do it, but that is one of the best parts. It's part of the reason we actually don't have much to show you in the way of examples is mostly, or the one, they take them home.
Yeah.
They take them home and they're with them, yeah. And I just wanted to say, again, in our appreciation, we've also appreciated the DeLynn Foundation, but all of that education support comes from donors. The George and Mavis Grant and Lilly Education Fund helps to pay for some of those materials, but also we have a couple other of our student workers here who are helping me with these programs, because even Virginia and I can't handle those 90 students coming at one time. So I've got some really excellent, Kendall is a master's student in art education, Bailey is a double major in art history and history. Is that right? Or no, you're mine. Anthropology, and then art history is the minor. You're a double major, double minor, Rose crew, and then somehow finds time to come help with our programs. So just sort of saying the nature, the reason we're able to do all of this is through grant funding and donor funding to make sure, because also another important point is those tours are offered free of charge to all schools. We've had various, the Abby Robin Jacknovitz School Travel Fund helps to pay for buses, and we're very grateful for that, so they don't have to pay for transportation. We don't pay an entry charge, and we use some of those donor funds to support the materials to send these take-home things. So we're just tremendously grateful for those opportunities for our community, for our students. Again, it's really wonderful to be able to offer Virginia a job coming out of their work here as a student to start a museum-based career.
How far do you see this being, physically, geographically being able to travel?
Yeah, so right now,
In Pennsylvania and Maryland?
yeah. Yeah,
We're keeping it West Virginia right now. We are planning on having it open, like our traveling workshops to Mound County, Preston County. We already had, like, as soon as we opened the registration, we had 2 different teachers in West Preston School, which is out by Arthurdale. They're like an hour away. And as far as like Upshur County, Taylor, maybe, like we're trying to get as far as we reasonably can in a day, you know?
So basically, I have a team that meets with me every Friday from 9 to noon, and we're trying to book those tours at that time when students don't have class. And it's basically as far as we can go with those students in that amount of time, do a 2-hour workshop and come back. And so usually an hour to 2 radius, and we're focusing on West Virginia right now just because of that kind of land grant state focused mission. But we actually have, we've done a lot of work with a school in Crellin, Maryland, which is literally just over the border. It's like right by Oakland, Maryland, and they've come here for several workshops, and I think we're gonna go out there for things. So we have touched over the borders a little bit. Other questions? Yes, okay, so Virginia, our registrar, while we're offering gratitude and appreciation and thanks, as Bob explained when he was having conversations with the artist, those conversations were also part of arranging this as a loan to the museum and being created in this format and this form specifically for our space. So, and one of the really special things about this exhibition in particular that we're in is it's celebrating 30 years of the Dean Lectureship, sponsored by Allison and Patrick Dean. So all of these people are people who've spoken in that lectureship over the past 30 years, which means all of them have been here, talked to our students, worked with our students, and in some cases built relationships with our students, our faculty, and staff. So we have been able to leverage some of those relationships in the way that we have loans for this exhibition and are able to bring this all together, is because these are all folks who have in some way had a connection to this space. So that's not the only example of that kind of loan in this gallery. So again, a lot to be thankful for. The artists, the deans, we are you know, being held up by many here to do the work that we do. Anybody else? Okay, so I want to thank Virginia again and welcome them to our staff. I also, Carol very rightly asked how people know about these things, and we will try to be better at getting the word out. But one important note for some of our regulars, so we will have, as we often do on the first Friday, our Lunchtime Looks series on March 7th. However, it is going to be at 1 p.m. instead of noon, because it is going to be with Dr. Adam Komisarek, who is the co-curator of the Radiant Pages exhibition behind me. And, but Adam is a faculty member in the English department, and he teaches until 12:30. So he said he was happy to do a Lunchtime Looks, but he can't do a Friday at noon. So it is going to be, the next iteration of Lunchtime Looks will be Friday, March 7th, but at 1 p.m. instead of 12 noon. And we will try and get that messaging out to all of our supporters so that they can come here and listen to Dr. Komisarek. I thank you all for being here. Please do follow our socials and things. I know you've got, people have kids and grandkids. We're going to do a story hour every month upstairs with some art activities that are going to be led by some of these student workers in February, March, and April. Those book binding workshops, we're also going to do a paper making workshop, both of which are going to happen in March 1st and March 8th. So there's lots of opportunities to engage with the museum. But I thank you all for being here, and thanks to Virginia. Thanks to Jason for the help. All right.